Perhaps the scariest thing in our modern world is not having enough time to do the things that you want to. As mundane of a plight as it is, it's something that we can all relate to, because at the end of the day, we all only have a certain amount of time here, and the same applies for computers. It's estimated that about 2% of hard drives fail annually, but perhaps a greater contributor to computers failing than even hardware running out of date can be found as software. Statistica.com estimates that, in 2021, approximately 5.4 billion attacks were conducted by malware programs. When it comes to operating a computer, there's probably no worse feeling than realizing that you have, in fact, just opened software containing a virus. But because this has become such a common experience in the current day, a lot of creative minds have worked to pair this unpleasant experience with traditional horror media, and some of the outcomes are pretty damn interesting. And so today we'll be looking at interesting cases of viruses in horror media. Perhaps the earliest and most influential example of viruses being used as a set piece in horror media comes from the now infamous YouTube username 666, which was initially uploaded by Nana825763. This guy was a VFX student at the time, and he definitely created something memorable by combining demons and the very new platform that was YouTube at the time, which in itself was far more customizable than it is now. You could basically turn the entire web page into something unique, whereas now you can only adjust your icon and banner. This ended up becoming one of the first giant hoaxes regarding the age of social media, and set the stage for many iconic creepypasta where someone ends up taking a ordinary program, website, or game and creates a massive community around an allegedly cursed or haunted copy of them. Binge Round or Sonic.exe, of course, come to mind as pioneers of this field as well. And if you do want more stuff like this, there is always the Vibing Leaf channel, which I would argue has greatly contributed to the revival of this form of media, because it has been a decade, or nearly 2 decades at this point. We're quickly approaching the latter half of the 2020s, and with that comes a sense of longing for the past. People who grew up from the late 90s to mid-2010s downloading shady viruses onto their family's devices have begun to create a new generation of viruses in a horror setting, and it's definitely interesting to compare this revival to that of analog horror, which was mostly focused on VHS nostalgia from the 80s to the 90s. That said, I think the best community to witness these two different types of horror is the Five Nights at Freddy's community.
Begin audio prompt in 3, 2, 1.
In all honesty, the FNAFers have probably been responsible for both of these revivals, at least for the most part, so I think this is going to be a fun place to look. So when it comes to analog horror, you usually have 2 types of stories being told. You have your found footage-esque, diegetic stories being recorded by a camera that exists in the world, and the contents of it are being viewed through some form of VHS recording. Usually stuff gets pretty dicey. Things like Blair Witch or Backrooms or most of Baddington's works might fall under this category. Generally spooky stuff happening to a character that happens to be recording everything, and as a result, you get to see everything that the character does, and it's very effective in building up paranoia or dread, which are perhaps 2 of the best things that horror in general can do. On the other hand, we have media that exists within the universe but doesn't exactly follow a certain protagonist. These are normally haunted cartoons or PSA-style videos, where some form of anonymous figure is giving you information or a warning about something. Most of the time, these videos will start off as normal, with slight visual distortions being thrown into the mix before everything goes absolutely batshit insane, and in any effective piece of analog horror, these 2 styles typically will blend together to once again create a sense of paranoia in the viewer, or otherwise just something spooky to scare you. In general, most of these feel like you should not be watching them. It feels like something out of, say, The Ring, where, uh-oh, something spooky is gonna happen any minute now, and you just get to sit and let your mind run wild while things progressively get more insane. Now here's the thing about most computer virus horror. While it is true that games like I'm Scared or Doki Doki Literature Club have been around since the 2010s, the thing about this is, in recent times, most computer virus horror is entirely just played for laughs, and I find that very interesting. Here we have Five Nights at Freddy's Ransomware, a very interesting video to me for a number of reasons, but I'll get into that in a moment. So the fascinating thing about this video is that the original creator makes videos based off of just whatever they dream about, and I find that really weird because the scenario that plays out in it apparently was very common for people to dream about back in the day, and that's strange, but even stranger are the contents of the video. So this guy hops into Notepad, goes blah blah blah, here's this cool ransomware that I found. He opens up the game, Five Nights at Freddy's, and he used AI to recreate all sorts of different scenes from Five Nights at Freddy's, along with several other shots that, while I wouldn't say are necessarily scary, I think they do have a creepy presence to them. Like, look at this image of Freddy Fazbear just staring off into the abyss from the dark room. Like, I don't know, I feel like, I wouldn't say it's necessarily scary, but it has a uneasy presence to it. And then, of course, the game crashes and his computer restarts, and, this amalgamation pops up. And I mentioned that this video in particular was fascinating to me, and that's partially because, again, this was created entirely off of a dream that he had, and other people have apparently had similar dreams, but more so because you can very clearly follow the paper trail back to how this guy might have dreamt about this. You see, back in 2020, the Fazbear Fanverse initiative was announced by Scott Cawthon, the creator of FNAF, and effectively what it was is a way for fan game developers who had already proven themselves to make really good stuff to effectively make a FNAF game with the budget of the actual FNAF series. Now, one of these games was Five Nights at Freddy's Plus, and unfortunately, the developer behind it ended up in some hot water over all sorts of stuff that I'm not going to get into here. You can go and search it up yourself if you want to, but the point is that the game was never made. And as a result, the YouTuber from Russia, being Lost Paw Play, stepped in and said, you know what, I can code. And so he ended up basically just recreating the entirety of the game from what was seen in the teaser trailers. Now, there was a lot of extra gameplay elements and just features of the game that were not showcased in these teasers, and as a result, they will probably never see the light of day. And while Lost Paw Plays did make a very good FNAF remake, without any of these extra bells and whistles initially planned for the game, it was just that, a FNAF remake. And when trying to upload it to GameJolt, it was very clear that it would break copyright infringement, and as a result, he could not legally upload it there. So instead, he created a Telegram account to share the download, which would have been fine. This would have been where the story ended, but a whole bunch of big YouTubers decided to hop onto the trend and just advertised the game as if it was the real thing in their videos, without really ever crediting the original creator, Lost Paw Play, and so people would flock to GameJolt, the premier service for FNAF fan games and just a lot of other indie games in general, and instead of getting the actual FNAF Plus remake by Lost Paw, they instead downloaded malware, because some sneaky bastards decided to upload a Trojan to the website disguised as FNAF Plus. You can probably see how this loops back around to Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, this started another manhunt for a supposed piece of lost malware called Stingray, which was basically just the same thing, only instead of FNAF Plus and GameJolt, it was FNAF 2 and the iOS Play Store. And what made this interesting is apparently, before encrypting your files, it would play a very scary custom jump scare, which sounds honestly rightfully terrifying for any kid perusing the iOS Play Store in like 2014 or something. And yeah, so it pretty quickly spread around the internet, and a lot of people on like TikTok or YouTube Shorts ended up creating their own fan-made interpretations of what this jump scare might have looked like. So that's an interesting trend, but Five Nights at Freddy's ended up creating its own interesting trend of just a whole bunch of people recreating the exact same video format with every single game in the FNAF franchise, and some of these are just, like, completely strange. Like, the first one made sense because it was made from a dream, whereas these are just, like, insane. It also sparked a lot of conversation about using AI in online media, which I think is really funny, because the original video is satire based around what a guy saw in his dream, and it's like completely sparked like serious discourse about art, which, you know what, there's discussion to be had there. I'm sure there's a lot of insightful videos about that. GoMotion made a really good video talking about this, and it's actually how I uncovered this entire rabbit hole. So yeah, maybe go look at that if you want. But yeah, I don't know. That's really funny to me. Anyway, honing it in for the last stretch, there's also Annoying Talking Orange, which is a very good parody, I guess, of pretentious video essays and computer virus horror created by SizSticks, which honestly is immaculate. He just makes up a bunch of shit and then puts it into a really high quality video essay. He tells the story of an annoying orange app that does a whole bunch of stuff, most notably taking control of your GPS, and it drives a dude off of a cliff. It's really good. It's really funny too. Go watch that right now, because I'm ending this video. I really just wanted to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's SETI, and I've done that. So my work here is done. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good night, guys. Peace.